So we're starting, huh?
Yours. We're starting.
Cool. This is very exciting. Hello, good afternoon, everyone. I think a couple of more people are still coming in, but that is okay. We're still starting. My name is Christina. I'm one of the co-founders of the Center for Feminist Foreign Policy. We are a research, advocacy, and consulting organization that is promoting a feminist approach to international politics. You are joining an incredible start of an event series on intersectional perspectives on climate justice that we, the Center for Feminist Foreign Policy, are hosting together with the Ban Ki-moon Center. And my colleague from the center, Jessica, will speak in a second as well. Maybe a few words, not too much, I don't want to bore you, and you are not here because of me, but a few words on the Center for Feminist Foreign Policy. We're based in London and also in Berlin. In Berlin, we've been around for 2.5, 3 years roughly. And we are tackling all different areas, different areas in foreign and security policy and trying to bring anti-patriarchal, intersectional perspectives in there. So to give you a couple of examples, we're currently, for example, working on a project on militarization as the source of conflict. We're also working on a project on the attacks by right-wing and other actors on the international women's and LGBTQI rights system. We're also establishing a fellowship, the Meya Yim fellowship on decolonized knowledge to influence feminist perspectives on foreign policy. And this is a very proud moment because this event now kicks off our cooperation with the Ban Ki-moon Center. And I'm very excited for this event to be happening. My colleague Sheena will now introduce the series to you, and also our distinguished speaker Priscilla, who we'll hear from in a second. And I'm handing over to you now, Sheena.
Thank you so much, Christina. And yes, also a very warm welcome from my side. My name is Sheena Anderson, and also a team member of CFFP. And we're so happy to have you with us and overwhelmed really by the interest in this topic. And before I start with my introduction and some more details about the event, let me briefly say again that this webinar is being recorded and live streamed on Facebook. Also, after the input by Priscilla, you will have the opportunity to ask questions or make comments after after the input by the keynote speaker. You may raise your hand to do that and we will unmute you so you will be able to speak, or you can of course post the questions in the chat. And that being said, let's start. Climate justice has been on the radar of the Center for Feminist Foreign Policy for a while, but as a rather small organization, we never really had the personal nor financial resources to truly take up this topic until now. We want to offer intersectional feminist analysis of how to tackle the climate crisis and understand it as an essential part of human security, and especially the security of women and non-binary people. The climate crisis is more than global warming and the need to produce less carbon dioxide. It works as a multiplier of inequality, threatening and worsening the living conditions of already marginalized people, especially Black, Indigenous, and women of color. The aim of this webinar is to highlight the importance of truly fostering climate justice from an intersectional feminist perspective, tackling racial, social, economic, health, and environmental injustice altogether. And together with the Ban Ki-moon Center for Global Citizens, we will be hosting a webinar series called Climate Justice for All. And today, this event is the launch of this series. And it will include 7 webinars in total, aiming to empower activists, academia, policymakers, and civil society in using climate advocacy and implementation strategies in the framework of the SDGs through an intersectional feminist lens. Each event speaks to different target audiences and focuses on knowledge exchange, joint learning, the creation of safe spaces, and networking. The goal is to open the floor to as many people as possible so that they can be heard, while also making people aware of topics they usually avoid or simply not aware of. Thus, before we start, and I briefly introduce our keynote speaker, Priscilla, I'd like to say a special thank you to our friends and colleagues at the Ban Ki-moon Center, whom we're hosting and doing this webinar series with. And yeah, it's just been such a fun ride and a fruitful partnership. And that being said, Jessica, I hand over to you.
Hi, everyone.
Thank you so much, Sheena, and also a warm welcome from my side. My name is Jessica Besch, and I am the project coordinator from the Ban Ki-moon Center for Global Citizens here in Vienna. For those of you who don't know us, we are a quasi-international organization who are working in the framework of the UN Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Climate Agreement, aiming at empowering women and youth to unleash their full potential. We are very happy to be partnering with the Center for Feminist Foreign Policy on the topic of climate justice, as we believe that feminist partnerships are key to really dismantling the oppressive power structures that uphold economic, political, and also social inequalities. Thank you to the amazing Dr. Priscilla Achakba for joining us today as our first speaker, and I'm really looking forward to the discussion afterwards and hope to be seeing most of you also during our next webinars throughout the months to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. And it is now my honor to introduce
Gina, we lost you for a second. Because of
sorry, I was still muted. So sorry. Yeah, it is now my honor to introduce our keynote speaker, Priscilla Achakba. Dr. Priscilla Achakba is the founder and executive director of the Women Environmental Program, WEP, in Nigeria, which currently has offices in Nigeria, Togo, Burkina Faso, Tunisia, and the US. She has over 20 years of experience in development work, gender issues, research and documentation, resource mobilization, monitoring and evaluation, conflict intervention and peace building negotiations, labor activism, and poverty reduction intervention programs. Currently, the WEP has United Nations ECOSOC consultative special status, observer status to the UN Environmental Program and United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, the UNFCCC, and is an organizing partner of women's major groups representing Africa on the 2030 agenda at UN processes. Priscilla has held many positions at national and international level and is a member of different development bodies across the globe. She's also a recipient of several awards and a member of different professional associations and networks. She's an Ashoka Fellow and was named an Eco Hero by Germany's Deutsche Welle and by Nigeria's Channels Television. In 2015, Vogue described her as one of 13 formidable women leading the way in the fight against the climate crisis. And along with several other diplomas, Priscilla holds a PhD in economics from the University of Business Engineering and Management in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And yeah, Priscilla, it is just such a tremendous honor to have you here with us today. And I'm very much looking forward to hearing and learning from you. And yeah, I'm sure all of us here are. And with that being said, I would now hand over to you for your input.
Thank you very much for that great introduction and for the background which you have given. I have been asked to deliver a keynote address on the theory and groundwork, an introduction to intersectional thought and the interconnectedness of the climate crisis, systematic inequality, and marginalized climate activism, leading to a series of planned webinars in regards. Let me take this time to congratulate and to thank the Center for Foreign Policy for providing a platform and opportunities for researching into one of the most complex issues of our time, feminism, and using the research findings to advocate and lead foreign policy discourse in a transparent and inclusive manner. So I am going to start my presentation. Before I go in fully, we need to understand what is intersectionalism. According to Wikipedia, intersectionalism is an analytical framework for understanding how aspects of a person's social and political identities combine to create different modes of discrimination and privilege. Examples of these aspects include gender, caste, sex, race, class, sexuality, religion, disability, physical appearance, and height. Next slide, please. Now, when you have defined what sectionalism is all about, now you have to link it up to what is the relationship between intersectionality and climate change. Climate change disproportionately affects men and women, richer and poor, as well as the old and the younger generation. As a result, there's a growing focus on climate justice, which looks at the climate crisis through the eyes of civil rights movement, with the most vulnerable people and communities at heart, while calling for a fair balance of responsibility, capability, and need. And if you look at from the diagram on your right, if you are watching it from the slide, you can see the issues of class plays very much, the issues of gender, nationality, age, mental and physical health, race, stroke, ethnicity, sexuality, and language and ability are all interconnected when it comes to the issues of intersectionality and climate change. Next slide. According to Audre Lorde, and I love this much, there is no such thing as a single issue struggle because we do not live single issue lives. That is to tell us that everything we do is interconnected. Again, studies have shown that the human-nature relationship, next slide, please. Again, studies have shown that the human-nature relationship goes beyond the extent to which an individual believes or feels they are part of nature. It can also be understood as an inclusive of adaptive synergy with nature, as well as our long-standing actions and experiences that connect us to nature. Intersectional analysis of climate change focuses on how social categories such as gender, race, social class, ability, sexual orientation, religion, and other aspects of identity interact at various levels, thus contributing to discrimination, exclusion, social inequality, and systematic injustice. Because climate change impacts marginalized people and communities more significantly than others. On an international and local level, globally, the countries least responsible for emissions, and indeed Africa, are most impacted by systematic oppression, such as colonialization, are those now being hit the hardest by climate change. Locally, climatic changes and extreme weather often impact people and communities who are marginalized in society more severely and for a longer period of time. This could be small-scale farmers who are already being pushed out by industrial agriculture and then hit by flooding or unpredictable weather conditions. The responsibility, vulnerability, and decision-making power of individuals and groups in relation to climate change can be attributed to social structures based on characteristics such as gender, socioeconomic status, which from the introduction you could hear, which is the very reason why the Center for Foreign Policy has been set up after all, ethnicity, nationality, health, sexual orientation, age, and place. Moreover, the impacts of climate change as well as strategies for mitigation and adaptation may reinforce or challenge such structures and categorizations. Why are women essential to climate change discourse? And this is one of the things that is very dear to my heart. According to the UNFCCC, United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, there are 5 reasons why women need to be in the climate change discussion. 1, 100% of the population needs to be involved. 51% of humanity is comprised of women and girls. To meet the most ambitious 1.5 centigrade percent target of the Paris Climate Change Agreement and to limit warming to way below 2 centigrades, it is critical that the needs, perspectives, and ideas of women as well as of men are included in climate action so as to create just, effective, and sustainable solutions. Furthermore, indigenous women have experienced the impacts of climate change for generations and have been forerunners and leaders in environmental conservation. Their knowledge and expertise contributes greatly to building resilience to climate impacts and to cutting greenhouse gas emissions. The traditional skills and knowledge that women have related to natural resource management in areas such as innovation, waste, and energy are effective tools in climate action strategies. And this brings me to the fact that this indigenous knowledge, especially when policies are being discussed and when decisions are being taken, most of these women are hardly involved. And so it is time for us to wake up from that slumber and to tap into this indigenous knowledge of women. Because if we are talking about climate change and how we can combat climate change, we need to tap into that indigenous knowledge that especially the women have and the expertise they have. We need to enhance this indigenous knowledge. Empowering women means effective climate solutions. Women comprise approximately 43% of the agricultural labor force in developing countries. When provided with the same access to resources as men, women can increase their agricultural yields by 20 to 30%, not only stepping up total agricultural output in these countries by 2.5% to 4%, but also contributing to world hunger reduction by 12 or 17%, according to the United Nations. This can positively impact climate adaptation in 2 ways. 1, appropriate technology or resources contributes to more sustainable farming and conservation, and a reduction in poverty enables individuals to better adapt to changes in climate. 2, investing in women and girls creates ripple effects throughout entire communities and countries. Research shows that countries with high representation of women in parliament and decision-making are more likely to ratify both international conventions of the environmental treaties and domesticate it down. And while domesticating this, it then builds the capacity of the women and indeed the members of the parliament to understand the issues that affect women. So why are women essential to climate change discourse? 3, women are vital to building climate resilience in communities. Communities do better in resilience and capacity building strategies when women are also involved in planning. According to the UN Women, tends to share information about community well-being is that important for resilience. This is important for resilience and more willing to adapt to environmental changes since their family lives are impacted. Additionally, women are usually first responders in community responses to natural disasters, leaders in disaster risk reduction, and contribute to post-recovery by addressing the early recovery needs of their families and strengthening community building. And let me also inform you that sometimes last year, there was so much flooding in one of the states in Nigeria. A family of 7, the mother of 6 was trying to help her children, not caring whether she was drowned, she was going to drown. She had to address this issue while trying to save her children. All of them drowned in that flood. But the husband was found on top of a tree, which means he was able to survive without the wife and the children. That is to tell you that women are indeed the first responders in community and caregivers when it comes to responding to natural disasters. Climate change impacts everyone, but not equally. It is well established that climate change has a greater impact on those sections of the population that are most vulnerable, whether in developed or developing countries, and aggravates existing inequalities. Women commonly face higher risks and greater burdens from the impacts of climate change in situations of poverty and due to existing rules, responsibilities, and cultural norms. Targeted investment in gender equality and women's empowerment yields returns in environmental conservation, poverty alleviation, social policy, and achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. By tackling climate change with a gender lens, women's rights issues are also addressed, tackling rather than, of course, aggravating existing gender inequalities. Countries have agreed, work in progress, under the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Countries have recognized the importance of involving women, and this started in Lima, Peru, that involving women and men equally in UNFCCC processes and in the development and implementation of national climate policies that are gender sensitive. Women Environmental Program, which is my organization, recently, in fact, just last week, launched the action plan in partnership with the federal government of Nigeria, precisely Federal Minister of Environment on Gender and Climate Change, which targets 5 focal areas, namely agriculture, forestry and land use, food security and health, energy and transportation, waste management, and water and sanitation. All these target areas have been identified as critical areas where women are most vulnerable. Yes, the UNFCCC have a gender action plan, and it is expected that each country will go back to develop its own action plan based on national circumstances. But at the moment, from Africa, I can say that only a very few countries that have been able to develop their own gender action plan, and Nigeria happens to be one, with the support of Federal Minister of Environment and Women Environmental Program working together in partnership to develop this program. Now, how can we achieve climate justice entailing racial, social, economic, environmental, and health justice? Climate change, in fact, is a human rights issue. I suggest a systematization of the normative climate justice literature that can be used as an analytical framework to evaluate current developments in human rights law and policy, and their potential to diminish international, societal, and intergenerational climate justice. The relationship between human rights and climate change is twofold. On the one hand, the consequences of climate change have adverse effects on the enjoyment of human rights. And on the other hand, climate policies can lead to rights infringement of communities, in particular, indigenous peoples. A gendered analysis of climate change and impacts and responses. Most research is required to examine the intersectional effects of climate change, adaptation, as well as mitigation. For example, a nuanced gendered analysis that cuts across the axis of social differentiation is required to assess low carbon pathways at the global and local levels to understand the cost of these transitions, including more research on intra-household carbon footprints, energy poverty and burdens of value chain analysis of global supply chains. And I'm glad that the Center for Foreign Policy is one of the organizations that is very much spearheading this. Even though you say you are new, I know that with what you have started, the center is going to go places. Building inclusive climate knowledge, there is scope here for comparative work, building on areas such as traditions of citizen climate science, indigenous environmentalism, and alternative cosmologies. Engagement with diverse systems of knowledge and value can improve modeling and open up ways to communicate more effectively with communities, often on the front line of climate analysis, of climate injustice. New alliances for climate justice. New international alliances among disparate actors and social movements will be required to deliver more transformative versions of climate justice. More research and support are required to facilitate the development of such alliances that share common climate challenges, focused on case studies of effective climate justice campaigns aimed at identifying key enabling conditions and assessing the extent to which they might be replicable or generalizable to other contexts. Social movements and climate justice. There are strong indications, traditions of indigenous activism in Latin America, tribal activism in India, and parts of Africa, highlighting the important role of environmental defenders the world over. Unfortunately, let me pause here that most of the environmental defenders, especially women, have been killed as a result of their activism. And we pray and only hope that our governments worldwide will take this very seriously, that these women, these environmental defenders, are only but defending their own rights. But under what conditions might climate justice concerns be basis for broader social mobilizations that cut across regional, class, race, and gender divides? Are there spaces and places in which this is already happening? If so, according to the UK IDS SC UK Working Paper, Volume 2020, number 540, Towards Transformative Climate Justice, Key Challenges and Future Directions for Research 10. Can this activism be supported through engagement activities, research and toolkits for advocacy, legal activism, and the like? Do we have places where, if we have, for instance, our environmental defenders have been wrongly assaulted, that they can go to and perhaps talk to the people that will be able to help them? Marginalized climate activists. Now, why is it that most of the women leading climate activists come from marginalized places? As the saying goes, he who feels it knows it, which means as climate change continues to pose serious threats to inclusive and sustainable development across all levels, its adverse impacts are much more manifested at the local through community level. Communities whose livelihoods are largely reliant on natural resources are the most vulnerable. It is therefore understandable that most of the persons demanding climate justice are those that have been marginalized and are greatly affected by climate impacts. Women have been at the forefront of climate justice and personally have mobilized and will continue to mobilize women groups at national and global levels towards demanding for climate justice and system change. Because yes, if we get climate justice and the systems have not changed, it means that we have not really changed the climate. So we believe that if systems change, the climate will also change. So women and marginalized groups are demanding for justice, but also policies that translate into actions that impact positively on the people. Now, I'll just give you some insight into the work that I've been doing over the years. Women Environmental Program, which is the body that I represent, which is the body that I founded since 1997, has offices in Burkina Faso, Niger, Togo, Tunisia, and Nigeria as the headquarters. WEP emerged in 1997 in Kaduna State, Nigeria, as a non-governmental organization by a group of grassroots women led by me in response to the environmental pollution by industries in Kaduna State over the years. Since then, WEP has expanded our interventions to environmental issues, peace and security, climate change, and governance. But let me also just give a little bit of background of how, apart from the response to environmental pollution, most of the textiles industries in Kaduna then were discharging their influence directly into the river, into the environment. And what we call River Kaduna was the single sources of water for majority of the people in the communities where they were living. And this water was toxic. It became infectious to the extent that a lot of women that were using this water for drinking, for cooking, and for doing everything, their skin started changing. And of course, when their skin started changing, it was attributed to witchcraft. And so with that, because of some women, the grassroots women, we came together, we said, look, we need to do something about this. And of course, we took the sample of the soil, we took the sample of the water, which was taken to a lab. And when it was tested, it was proved to be toxic that was being thrown into the environment. Because these textiles companies did not have a central processing treatment plan. So everything that they were doing was being thrown into the environment. So we took that up, and when we took that up, it became a point of force for advocacy, and we took the companies to court. And of course, we won some of the cases. So WEP envisions a world where the lives of women and youth are positively transformed. WEP collaborates with the government and high institutions, agencies at all levels to deliver in fulfillment of our vision and mission of closing the gap on gender mainstreaming into policies and governance issues. Furthermore, WEP partners with CSOs, research institutions, donors, private sector, and all stakeholders to promote sustainable development across the world. WEP believes in advocating globally, but acting locally for effective impact. In regards, we partner with the Federal Minister of Environment, Nigeria, through the Department of Climate Change to provide technical support towards the development of the first ever National Action Plan on Gender and Climate Change, the first ever in Nigeria and one of the few across Africa. This is an important policy document that can enhance the implementation of gender-responsive climate change programs and policies. The programs are embedded in the Nigeria Economic Growth and Recovery Plan to ensure gender is a cross-cutting issue in all the thematic areas: energy, agriculture, access to land, climate change, and access to water. We are currently coordinating the Gender and Environment Movement, the first of its kind in Nigeria. It is a movement of over 100 women's rights organizations working towards holding government accountable to gender and climate justice. WEP in partnership with 4 other global and regional women's organizations, Women Engage for a Common Future, Gender and Water Alliance, Global Forest Coalition, and Asia Pacific Forum on Women, Law and Development, is implementing the Women 2030 project, which means women organizing to implement the Sustainable Development Goals. So far, the capacity that is through that Women 2030 project, the capacity of over 100 women's rights organizations have been strengthened on monitoring and implementation of the SDGs and the climate agreement. Over 50 women rights organizations have been supported to participate in the UNFCCC, that is Conference of Parties, in the past 5 years. These organizations have also participated in the monitoring of the SDGs to ensure that gender is effectively mainstreamed across all the goals. Globally, WEP is also active in global civil society and women's rights networks and movements. Such networks include Women Major Groups, Women and Gender Consistency, African Working Group on Gender and Climate Change, etc. On GEF, our organization is one that is Global Environment Facility. Our organization is one of the regional focal points for GEF, West Africa. The focal point serves as the main contact for the GEF Secretariat, GEF agencies, and other stakeholders. WEP, in collaboration with Women and Gender Consistency, have advocated at UNFCCC for gender inclusivity and funding to be sustainably more accessible to women's rights groups and responsive to gender considerations. Over the years, WEP has directly and indirectly impacted over 30 million women, people, communities across the globe through her interventions. In conclusion, we cannot talk about the issues of climate change without linking it up to COVID-19. COVID-19 has brought us to the realization that whether rich or poor countries, there is no barrier to how it affects the citizenry. Therefore, there is no limit to the solutions to this global pandemic that can be tackled by just one country, but this requires collective efforts through a gender lens perspective. We need a global movement of climate change feminists to continue to advocate for solutions from a gender perspective to tackle COVID-19 and climate change, which is also a disaster. I appreciate once again the Center for Feminist Policy to be part of this important webinar series, and I look forward to participating in the remaining series.
Thank you.
I just have one last conclusion. In the year 2015, the Holy Father, Pope Francis, at the United Nations General Assembly, equalized the earth, which he referred to as our common home, a sister with whom we share our life, and a beautiful mother who opens her arms to embrace us. He cautioned the world to take immediate actions to save the earth by changing the unsustainable development. The Laudato Si has gained prominence as strong advocacy tool for environmental sustainability. According to the Pope, God created and loves the earth and wants humans to love it too. Therefore, choosing to care for the environment and fight climate change is simply following God's wishes. I thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Priscilla, for this input and all your insights into your long experience and the work of the WEP, and also challenges. And yeah, I would now, there are already some questions actually. I would now maybe ask 1 or 2 questions to give the rest of the audience time to think about your input again and maybe sort some questions out that everyone has. And just a small reminder for everyone listening, you can either write your messages or your questions, or you can raise your hand and then we will unmute you. But maybe one or two questions from our side. First would be that, and you've mentioned this when we talked about the topic previously, that it is rather complex, of course, and maybe some people struggle with talking about it. So my question to you would be, when talking about climate justice and also intersectionality or intersectional feminism, and it seems overwhelming and sometimes complicated, do you have any strategies to tackle this issue of complexity when you talk about these issues? Do you have any recommendations for that?
Yes, the word climate change itself is very abstract and seems to be better understood by scholars and academics. When one relates it to climate justice and intersectionality, it becomes even more complex and misunderstood by many, especially the grassroots and policymakers. I strongly believe that one of the strategies of dealing with the situation is to unpack the issues of climate change in the language that will be understood by many. Secondly, this can be translated into many languages, creating awareness, using conventional media, especially in the communities, such as town hall cries and meetings, using seasons and events for interpreting climate change, using examples of scenarios close to home to communicating climate change. Working in the field, I can tell you that it is indeed complex, because when you talk to people about climate change and you don't relate it to scenarios or to seasons, most of the people don't understand what you're talking about, because this seems to be an abstract thing. So it is important for us to begin to unpack what climate change is all about, put it in the languages, maybe local languages, and translate it so that people get to understand how to be able to deal with the issues of climate change.
Thank you so much. And also maybe a second question that is kind of related to the first one, but when we think about mechanisms, concrete mechanisms and tools that we can use to truly interact and value with marginalized voices on eye level and in a respectful way, do you have any recommendations for that? Because what we usually see is that when marginalized voices, and especially women, are thought of and integrated, it's usually at the last point. But how can we maybe do it previously and do it in a very respectful and caring way?
Well, you have said it all. The worst thing that can happen to anyone is to feel isolated and excluded. In this regard, the best way you can help and you can help end exclusion and isolation is to work on being a strong ally, as well as including educating oneself on the privileges of a group. If you belong to any group, you need to understand what the group stands for. The kind of language that you use is critical. Based on my practical experience working with communities and marginalized groups, there is a need to pay attention to what they say and must avoid generalization or stereotypes. The words we use might cause offense, even if we do not mean it. Be ready and willing to accept corrections, understand the cultural values of the people, and seek out marginalized voices and perspectives. And finally, as much as possible, try to educate your own community. Your voice is very important, most effective within your community. And I can tell you that working with my communities and being a voice for them is more effective and understanding their values, what they stand for, their cultural backgrounds, and how you interact with them makes them feel that they are included and not excluded or isolated. So it is important for us, even as activists, that when we're out there in the field, dealing with the marginalized people or dealing with communities that we perceive that are marginalized, we should be able to put ourselves in their own place. How would you feel when you are marginalized, excluded, and isolated? You know, you withdraw into your shell, but when there is somebody there to make you feel that you indeed, you can listen to me or listen to her, we become more open and we feel that we are part of the community or part of the group.
Thank you. I would now maybe give the chance to the audience. We already have 2 questions here. Also, friendly invitation to all of the rest. Kindly put your questions in the chat or in the questions. I don't know actually what this is called, if it's also a chat, but you have the opportunity to post questions or raise your hand, of course. So there has been a question by Joanna Costa. The work of WEP sounds incredible. What was the legal basis used for the actions brought before the courts? And thank you very much. Maybe you can draw on this a little.
The question once again, because I have one here, is asking me, could you tell us about the project that the web was involved in that you consider successful at placing the gender intersectionality dimension at the center of sustainability through climate change issue? Yes, I can just rightly answer that. We have been greatly involved. In fact, we have a project on renewable energy, we call it solar dryer tents, in a community in one of the states in Nigeria, precisely Benue State, where a lot of women are farmers, and of course, they farm a lot of tomatoes, pepper, let me say perishable crops, and most of the time they have the middlemen, which are usually men, and of course, the people that bring this to the farm, to the markets are also men, even though the women are the ones that do most of the farming. At the end of the day, we discover that their labor and everything goes in vain because what they get is as good as nothing. So together with the women, we were able to find a solution. And finding a solution was how to dry these perishable crops so that when it's time, when it's harvest time, they will be able to dry it, and when it's off season, they can earn economic value from that. That is one of the success stories that we have in planning, in putting women at the table, especially addressing the issues of climate change. We have several other ones, such as mobilizing for climate justice in Nigeria, mobilizing for climate justice at the global level. For instance, the Gender Action Plan, which we have at the UNFCCC, is as a result of not just WEP, but through the Women and Gender Consistency and other very many women organizations that will be able to mobilize. And of course, as at the time I became a negotiator myself, and I used that opportunity to be able to also push this, which was also adopted.
Thank you, and also thank you for the question. And I would just repeat the other question, maybe because it was directly to the work of the WEP, concerning the legal basis used for the actions brought before the courts. Don't know if you want to say something about that.
The legal action brought before the courts.
Yes, regarding the work of the WEP.
We have been able to, the challenge we faced then in Kaduna State, like I stated before, had to do with the pollution by the industries who were discharging the influence directly onto the environment. And of course, the WEP has some of their board members are lawyers, and we also have people who are passionate about the work that we do, and so they support us. And so through our legal team within the Women Environmental Program, we were able to take these industries to court. And taking them to court, one of the things that happened was that they now formed a committee called Industrial Pollution Abatement Committee. And this committee was to make sure that all the industries come together to have a central processing unit where all the effluents will be processed in that central processing unit. And work was made to serve on that committee as well, to make sure that what the industries have agreed, they were adhering to it. Secondly, some of the cases that we won in the court, unfortunately, the industries, because of the economic downturn, most of the industries closed up, but it was a successful story. And of course, one of the industries particularly was the river textiles, which was then closed down until they were able to put their treatment plant in place.
Thank you. And then here is another question asking, how do we convince equal or 50-50 participation across organizations and leadership positions instead of letting the narrative of merit, experience, and knowledge be prioritized in a community?
Well, as I said, we still live in a world of patriarchy, especially when it comes to the issues of equality. Most communities and most countries will not want to hear about the issues of equality. And of course, when it comes to negotiating table, it's very difficult. I can tell you, I've been one of the forerunners in this country, in my country, Nigeria, advocating for women to be in leadership positions, canvassing for them in political arena. As at the last election, the number of women that are in parliament have dropped drastically. And this is not because the women are not very good, but it's because, one, politically, the issues of money politics plays out very much. So they say, he who paves the pipes deters the tune. And most of the women do not have that economic power to be able to face the men. And so as feminists in the country, we have a feminist group in this country, which I happen to be one of them, and we're advocating and saying that even if it means feminist women, we contribute to support feminists with ₦1 or just 1 kobo for women that we strongly believe that can make it. We support them to go through the election process. On the other hand, we are advocating that if women cannot get through the election because of the several issues that are involved, the web of issues that are involved, including financial, including violence, which most of the women will not be able to stand violence, including night meetings which hold at around 2 to 3, 4 a.m., leaving your family to be involved in this. We are saying that we are ready to support those women, whether young or old, to be part of this. So there's a huge challenge. Whether we like it or not, we're still in that patriarchal system. And so for us to get to those points, it means that what a man can do in just 5 minutes, in just 10 minutes, a woman, it will take a woman to prove to be better than that man. Even if she's better, the society attributes to the fact that she's a woman. And so why should she be in this position? And that is the situations that most women have found themselves. So the issue of being 50-50, we still have a long way to go. But this is the struggle that we must continue. The struggle that we have to keep on at all levels. And I mean at all levels. But it's a good thing that we have, even in Africa, we have women that are now presidents. Rwanda has shown us a very good example that they have 50-50. And of course, Liberia and so many other countries are also coming up. We are hoping that Nigeria will one day also become one of such countries that will have 50-50 in parliament and in decision making. But of course, we know that this is something that each and every one of us is passionate about. And the feminist group in Nigeria are working so much behind the scene, in every position to make sure that we get our women into those positions.
Thank you. And I would now take a question from someone who has raised their hand, and I apologize if I mispronounce your name, Tunde Oya, and we would now unmute you. Can you hear us? No? Okay, I would then just take the next question and get back to you later. Maybe we can sort the technical issues out. And it actually fits perfectly because we've already, or you now already talked about feminism and also Nigerian feminism and feminist groups. And here was also a question on that, asking if you can tell us more if there is something more specific about a Nigerian grassroots feminism that you can share, or something that is maybe typical for Nigerian feminism that we could also all learn from.
Well, the feminist groups in Nigeria, we have it from the national to the grassroots, and we are all working together to address issues such as gender-based violence, which you must have known that this is one of the issues that Nigeria is facing in the country. So our feminist groups are cut across all women, inclusive of the he for she, because we have the he for she who are supporting our movement as well. So what the feminist group are doing is that through our platform, the various platforms that we have, if we know of issues that are happening at the grassroots level, from the states, from the communities, in each of the states, there is a coordinator that is being reported. And of course, they take up the issues immediately. And if it's an issue that they cannot handle it at the state level, then at the national level, they step in. Of course, we have several lawyers among the feminist group, and we have the FIDA, that's Federation of International Women Lawyers. We have also the legal aid group, where some of those cases are reported. But apart from that, there are some cases that are being taken to court by our feminist lawyers and our feminist groups. And some of those cases, we have won them as well. Again, through the feminist groups, the violence against prohibition in persons, we're working to make sure that these acts, even though not passed at the federal level, at the state level, several states have passed this law. It has become a law. For instance, the Women Environmental Program in Benue State, we worked with the FIDA, Federation of Women Lawyers, and the other civil society groups and feminists. And of course, a bill on VAT was proposed, and at the end of the day, that has been passed and approved and is now a law. Secondly, the issues of administration of criminal justice, we also work in that area, and these laws have been passed. So several feminist groups across Nigeria are working at different levels. And this is something that is very important to us.
Thank you. And now I would go back to Tunde Oya. Can you hear us?
Exactly, I can hear you.
Yeah.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Hello?
Yes,
Good
we can
evening.
hear you.
Thank you very much, man. I really appreciate your gesture and the brain behind
Can you?
this wonderful initiative.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but it's like we can barely hear you.
No,
It's
yeah.
really cut off a little. Maybe you can, I don't know, try to unmute and mute again. I don't know if that helps. Otherwise, I've seen you've already also posted your question in the chat. So if it would be fine with you, I would read it out. And if there's something missing, you can still unmute yourself again.
All right, no problem.
Okay?
All right, no problem.
Okay.
Tunde,
Okay.
I have seen your chat. Tunde Oya, you are asking why we had a voluntary mechanism support of initiative and why it's limited to Benue State. It's not limited to Benue State alone. It cut across, even those that are not Nigerians have applied for it and they are part of it. Last year, we had over 100 people applying for this volunteerism. But what we did was that based on first come and people that we feel that we have a panel actually that selects the people that will come for this volunteerism. So it is not limited to only Benue State. It's a national thing. We have a lot of people that have passed through web. And even now, on this Friday, you can see if you go to our website, you will see that there's an advert there. Or if you're on LinkedIn or Twitter or Facebook, you will see that there's going to be a mentorship program for Friday again. So we don't limit it to just one particular state, but it cut across the whole country. And even for those people that can join us virtually that are out of the country, they do so.
Yes. Thank you.
Tunde, does
And
that
we're
answer your
done.
question?
Thank you so much for answering the question. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. And the next question here would be, what responsibility is put especially on the young generation to address the presented issues and challenges?
Well, the young generations, they need to learn a lot. And one of the things that we need to do for those of us that are feminists is to mentor them. The issues of mentorship for young people that are passionate about getting involved, it is imperative to stay under mentor scheme. But a lot of the young people are not interested in staying under the mentorship scheme. We can understand that some of us are on the fast lane, but of course, being on the fast lane, you have to learn. We agree that when you have multiple choices of learning, it is always better for you. But even with that, you need to have like a mentor to guide you. Even as an adult, we all need people to support us. We all need people to fall back on. We all need people to think together, whether what we are doing is good or not. So for the young people, it is important for them to at least get mentors and learn. While you learn, you'll be able to get what you want. You can be versatile in anything. Nothing stops you. but it is important that you learn. The other aspect, which I think we need to do for the young people, is to boost their capacity. Boosting their capacity means that we localize their actions. Localizing their actions is that let them at least have something that we'll be able to hold on to say this is what the young people are doing. Like I've told a lot of people that it is always important for us, especially in leadership position, to let the young people overshadow us. When they overshadow us, they will be learning. And even in negotiations, when you take the young people and you are negotiating, of course, they're learning from there. So at the end of the day, there's a kind of intergenerational transfer or knowledge transfer to these young people. So you are not closed up, but of course you have downloaded what you have learned to the young people to move on. If you come to Women Environmental Program now, most of the people that we have leading the organization are very much young people, and I am just supporting them now because I've become the global president and I need the young people to take over. As we are getting older, we want young people to be able to sit at the driving seat and we become the passengers, so that when they are not driving well, we say, oh no, please, can you move a little bit or can you shift this way? So for the young people, I will say that it's important, the issues of mentorship, the issues of capacity building, and the issues of intergenerational transfer, knowledge transfer is very key.
Thank you. I love that metaphor with the driver's seat. And there is also another question regarding climate justice, gender-based violence, and/or violence against women and girls, and sexual, reproductive, and health rights. All of these topics, do you see these issues as interlinked, and how?
Of course, the issue, when I was making my presentation, I talked about the issues of climate change defenders. And when you look at the issues of gender-based violence, and you relate it to most of the critical aspects or sectors where women are supposed to be spearheading the issues of energy, renewable energy, the issues of water and sanitation. These are the areas that you find out that women are mostly affected. And I give you a typical example. We have a situation in Nigeria where most of our rivers, especially Lake Chad, has dried up. And that was one of the biggest sources of livelihoods for not just women, but also for the communities. Now, majority of the people are forced to move, to migrate to one place or the other. The women are the ones that are left with the children. Of course, they have to fend for these children. The men, the husbands have abandoned them. And these women trek kilometers in search of water, in search of firewood, to cook for these children, including their husbands, whom I call our babies number one, to cook for them. And in doing so, sometimes at the point of looking for this water, they are being assaulted. And of course, they are being raped. And so these are issues that are related to the issues of climate justice. How do we bring into justice the issues of providing water, which is a right issue? God gave us water, land, free of charge. The issues of land, how many women can access land for the agricultural production? Only very few. And so in the course of this, the male child is most of the times the preferred against the female child. So this becomes an issue of violence, especially when it comes to dealing with the issues of climatic changes. I gave you a typical example of the flooding that took place in one state. And in fact, from 2012, we have had several issues of flooding and where women are mostly affected and nothing is being done about it. These are the injustices. But when it comes to decision making, it is the men that are sitting down there. So how do you know what affects me as a woman that you want to go and take a decision on my behalf? In terms of disasters, women have the best coping strategies, but are they at the decision-making table? In terms of violent conflict, violent extremism, when issues of peace, accords are being discussed, are women there? The gender-based violence has been a very serious issue, especially with the COVID-19 pandemic in Nigeria. Webb did a study on the economic, socioeconomic aspect of COVID-19. And it is a sorry situation, I tell you that, because men are now forced to stay at home. And because of that, the women had become punching bags for them, or they kick them like footballs and use all kinds of knives on them. So the issues of gender-based violence and climate change is aggravating every day. Although we talk about COVID-19, we strongly believe that climate change is a more disaster than COVID-19. The two are linked and the two must be addressed concurrently.
Thank you so much. And here's also another question. I will read it out, but also invite everyone listening. We have about, let's say, 7 to 8 more minutes to take on questions. So if you have a question, put it in the chat or in the raise your hand and we can unmute you. And here is another question saying, recently I've seen statements criticizing the use of the term vulnerable communities in the context of climate justice, as it would emphasize stereotypes and the certain power dynamics and disbalances. What are your thoughts on that?
A statement condemning.
Sorry?
The question once again.
The question was whether using the term vulnerable communities in the context of climate justice, if it's still appropriate, and what your thoughts are on that, because it was connected to emphasizing stereotypes and certain power dynamics, and whether you think so too, or if you use other terms, yeah.
Well, I would say that it depends on the community which you go into. I have said that before you get into the community, you must be able to understand their cultural values. And when you are able to understand their cultural and religious values, you'll be able to know the context, the language in which you'll be able to use to address the communities. I agree that some communities might not like to become vulnerable, but it depends on your entry point when you are discussing the issues of climate justice. And I said climate justice is very abstract. So when you want to discuss anything about climate change and climate justice, it means that you need to unpack the language for the communities, for them to be able to understand and say, yes, we're indeed vulnerable or we're not vulnerable. But language specific, you have to be very careful with the kind of language that you use so that the communities or the individuals are not stereotyped. Because, I mean, if you come to some communities and you are talking about the issues of women being in charge of decision making, automatically they shut you out. So when you are going into the community, you should be able to understand the terrain, study the terrain, understand the culture, understand the perspectives of what is affecting them, and you have to trust them, behave like them. When I go into the communities, I don't look myself. First and foremost, I have to put myself in who they are, interact with them the way they want people to interact with them and not to look down on them. So when you just go there and just assume that this community is vulnerable, you might be making a mistake, because dealing with communities, dealing with people whom you think that need your help, sometimes it's quite different. In practical terms, it's quite different, because most of them will look at it from a different perspective. So when you look at people and you say this one is poor, this one is rich, this one is that, please be careful. The language and the words that you use are very important and critical, so that you don't stereotype anybody.
Yeah, thank you. And I don't see any questions at this point, so I would ask another question. I have tons of questions. So you also mentioned national action plans during your input and presentation. And my question would be, as climate activists and civil society, how can we put pressure on governments to implement and develop these national action plans and really take them seriously, especially when often the knowledge of climate activists and women climate activists is not taken that seriously?
Well, I will tell you that the journey of the National Action Plan on Gender and Climate Change took several years. We started in 2016, and we have gone through several stages working with the government. We have fought, we have come back to make sure that this is very dear to us. And so there are times that you have progressive people that are in government that you can actually use. So consistency also matters a lot. It's not just to start and stop, but when you are consistent and persistent, you can be rest assured that some of those things will work. It took us from 2016 until last year. And of course, we have a progressive minister who is also a woman, and an activist herself in the Ministry of Environment, who spearheaded this thing and made sure that it was approved by the Federal Executive Council, headed by the President of Nigeria. So yes, we can share best practices, we can share experiences of how all these things started, and how we are, where we are with the action plan. The action plan has been approved. We are now looking at developing, we're already developing framework of implementation. And we are already looking at partners that will support this implementation of the action plan. Because we believe that having it at the national level is not just enough. Nigeria operates a federal system. We have the federal, we have the state, and we have the local government. But it's at the state and local government that most of the time the issues of climate change affect more. So if we have an action plan that has been approved at the federal level, how does this action plan cascade to the state and to the local government? It means that we have to develop the frameworks. It means that we have to look for as many partners, including governors, including states, including donors, including researchers such as yours, and including other partners to come on board, so that this action plan will really go down to the states, and of course, at the end of the day, we'll be able to use it. So We can share these best practices with other partners that are interested, the processes that we went through, and how we got to the point that we are. But the most important thing is that I think the willingness to do it and the persuasiveness of the nature of the issues that we're addressing. Climate justice is not just a one-off thing. It's not just mobilizing today and stopping, but you mobilize with concrete evidence. Your center is very apt and very focused on looking at the issues of foreign policy. We're looking at it from the point of feminism, but with concrete evidence that you're going to be getting on the ground, so that when you are talking, when you want to present and you want to advocate for anything, you have evidence to prove that this is why you're advocating for this. So governance is an issue that is very delicate. Sometimes they will want to have the evidence before they can take any action. So I will employ activists, civil society organizations, and the rest to be able to go into research, partner with agencies such as yours, so that we can have evidence that we can use to hold our leaders accountable for their actions.
Thank you so much. And yeah, we have one last question, and by Tunde Oya again. I've seen you raised your hand, and I'll try to unmute you again. Maybe it's better with your mic now, and if not, maybe you can also post your question in the chat. But you should be able to unmute yourself now.
Hello.
Yes.
Hello, good evening.
I'm sorry, I'll interrupt you right away because it's.
Can you hear me, please? Hello, can you hear me?
We can't. I
Yes,
can't
Hello,
hear you well. Maybe you can post your.
You can't hear me.
No, it's cut off. So maybe you can post your question in the chat.
Can you go ahead to let me hear? I can hear you.
All right, thank you so much, ma. My question is: you said you have initiated a waste recycling machinery in North Central there, but how can this initiative get to people all around the country?
I can't hear anything.
Hello, ma, you can't hear me?
No,
hello, ma.
It's
No,
cutting.
it's really cut off. Maybe please just post your question in the chat so we can read it. That would be better. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
Okay, so we will wait for the last question and then wrap it up. I would maybe, until we get the question in the chat, ask my last question now, which would be, do you have any advice? You shared a lot of advice already, but any more specific advice for young climate activists, especially young women climate activists of color within the climate movement?
Well, I've talked about the issues of mentorship for young activists, especially women that are passionate about getting involved, that it is imperative to stay under a mentor scheme that will invariably increase their action for a driven approaches, so that they do not get tired or or exit. In this process, it will help to boost their capacity on various forms of getting actions done and ways of engagement. Localizing action, what works for Africa might not work for Asia or might not work for Europe. So it is important that they localize their action, become conversant about it, and place it at the center of their climate action. Balancing up. Do not be one-sided in taking climate action because they might lose their audience attention or lose their credibility. Get involved on issues. They should always be up to date on information about what is happening and research beyond their domain for knowledge acquisition that suits what they're advocating for. You can only advocate for what you know. If you don't know it, you can't advocate for it. So young activists, especially young ladies, young women that wants to go into become climate activists, they must be knowledgeable about the issues that they want to start advocating for. And of course, they should do a lot of research into these things and learn from other activities. Network as much as they can. Knowledge is power. When you have knowledge, you have the power to advocate, you have the power to lead. And so don't just stay in your comfort zone, but they should go out and look for activists from other regions across the world and network with them, form the network, join feminist groups to learn more of what is happening. Because it's only when you join these groups and you share experiences and lessons, best practices, that you will become a better person for what you are doing.
Thank you so much, Priscilla. And I don't see the last question in the chat, so I would wrap it up since it's almost 6:30. And yeah, I don't know about all of you, but I am truly inspired and motivated to get to work now by all that has been said by you, Priscilla, and also by the interesting questions raised within this webinar. And I again want to especially thank you, Priscilla, for being here with us today. It was such an honor. And yeah, I personally took a lot of your input and also you answering the questions. And again, also thank you to our friends at the Ban Ki-moon Center. And as you might know, and as I have already said at the beginning of this webinar, that this was the first webinar of a series of 7 webinars on different topics surrounding intersectional analysis of the climate crisis. And our next and second webinar will take place on the 21st of April at 11 a.m. and will be hosted by our partners, the Ban Ki-moon Center. And topic-wise, it will focus on best practices and climate justice implementation strategies. So yeah, have a look at our social media. We'll be posting about it. We will post a registration link and also within our newsletters. And we hope that we maybe welcome you or some of you there in our next webinar. And until then, stay safe, stay healthy, take care of yourself and the planet, and yeah, enjoy the rest of your evening. And I would now give you, Priscilla, the last word.
Well, for me, it has been a pleasure to deliver this keynote address for this series of webinars that is going to be on. And I'm again energized. I'm again challenged with the questions that have come in to continue to do more, to support young people, especially young women young women are climate activists. I'm inspired by the Center for Foreign Policy, and I hope that I will become a member of the center as well. I'm ready to join to become a member of the center. So I want to thank the audience for listening to me. Please feel free to reach out to me if you have any further questions. I am out there. Ask your questions anytime, anywhere. You can send me an email. I'm available to respond to you. Thank you all.
Thank you so much. Thank you all. And yes, as I've already said, enjoy the rest of your evening or rest of your day, wherever you are. And thank you for being here.